So to close out day one, I'm very pleased to introduce our final session, which is focusing on the workforce. And I'm very happy to introduce Alan Phelan, founder and CEO of APTN.aero, a professional body and consultancy firm for aircraft technical professionals. An experienced aviation professional, Alan has over 30 years' experience in various senior sales, customer support, marketing, and engine leasing roles. This is a fully virtual session. So Alan, I'll hand over to you to introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. And hello, everybody. I'm really sorry I can't be with you there in person today in Stavanger. It's a lovely town. Been there a few times before. Hope to get back there again soon. So on that note, I would like to introduce you to the panel that we have here today. We have Christian Klein, who is Executive Vice President of the Aeronautical Repair Station Association, joining us from the US. And we have Caroline Vanderdrink, who is SVP Business Development at SR Technique. And I believe Caroline is in the US as well. So
I'm actually in Zurich.
In Zurich, excellent, closer still. So yeah, so hopefully we'll have a European, a US perspective on the whole area of the topic today, which is human capital and addressing a skill shortage. My first kind of comment on the title, I think human capital is a bit cold. It doesn't give the impression of people at all. And I think Glenn mentioned earlier on in the first session today that trying to keep his workforce motivated and interested is all about relationships and working with people. And I see more and more over the last number of months, organizations are introducing this new title called Chief People Officer, which I think is great. It's focusing on people rather than man hours and such like. So that's a good development. Also earlier today, listening to the session on when will the wave will come, Klaus Muller mentioned the book, The Goal, and labor bottlenecks, and that's with or without COVID, you would wonder, so if this wave comes, how will the skill shortage be addressed? And hopefully we can look into some of those areas today on this particular session. But my own experience prior to, say, the current roles, I was with Lufthansa Technique for over 30 years. So here's an engine shop that closed down in 2013, and about 400 people went out into the wider world. A lot of them went into other aviation ventures. A lot of them were absorbed into aircraft leasing companies in Dublin. And luckily enough, a couple of small engine shops have since opened up in Dublin. But I suppose, that transfer and loss of skill is something that we'll address here today. How do you retain these skilled individuals, keep them in the industry, and encourage them to be part of MRO in the future. So in Ireland, our kind of drain away from engine MRO has been into the pharma industry, IT, social media giants in Dublin, financial services. But under financial services, aircraft leasing is a big chunk of that, and luckily we retained a lot of the engine experience in leasing companies. The other factor in the Irish experience at the moment would be the consolidation of leasing companies over the last number of months. So we're all aware of the AirCap GCAS amalgamation. In the last couple of weeks, there have been some smaller consolidations. You have Gossock going into SNBC, and you have AMCK now going to be part of the Carlyle Group. So the net result of all those lesser consolidations is you're going to see a good number of redundancies and people going out in the industry on both technical, commercial, legal, but focusing here on the technical, there are going to be some skilled people available from those type of consolidations. There's also been consolidations in MRO with Lufthansa Technique Shannon partners working with Atlantic Aviation to take over their facility down there, and there will be some job losses there. So again, same thing applies. Where will those people go? Will they stay in the industry, or will they be attracted to other industries for whatever reasons? So that's some of the background from my perspective in Ireland. In terms of what to do about it, I see a couple of examples under this Chief People Officer umbrella recently with less hours, where they're offering staff 1 month paid leave to travel at their choosing, and other initiatives like that. What can we do in engine MRO to try and retain and attract new talent into the industry? So hopefully we'll get some idea from that under this talk. I was thinking as well, you know, back in the day where we attracted mechanics and skilled guys from other industries back in the 80s, all the guys came from garages, car mechanics, and they were trained up in engine MRO. And I'm just thinking nowadays, with the car has gone completely electrical and electronic, there's no the same skill sets aren't there. But maybe with that transition to electric cars, guys that are currently in the mechanical car world will see aviation and engine MRO again an attractive place to work. So on that note, I'll try and tease out some of the issues here. Caroline, in terms of COVID-19, have you seen any impact on the retention of skilled staff at SRT Engine Shop in the last year or 2 years? Would you like to take that question?
Hi, Alan. Thank you for having me on the panel. At SRT, we have been lucky with having a government program that allows short-time work, so we can retain our skilled workforce. Obviously, it's only applicable in Switzerland, and it's a necessary instrument for retaining valuable knowledge, so we don't lose that skill set when demand comes back. Obviously, it's not limited to Switzerland, because I understand some of the other engine shops in other parts of the world have had similar government programs. So that is definitely one way to retain your skills and not lose that experience to other industries.
Very good. No, I know, talking to Glenn Marston before, they have the issue with the oil industry in Norway attracting people away from aviation, and they have to introduce ways to keep guys and girls on board. So prior to COVID, was there a drift away from engine MRO, do you think, as well, or is it just more recently?
No, in the past, before COVID hit, it was very blatant. Everybody talked about pilot shortages. They didn't really talk so much about mechanics shortages, but we felt it in Switzerland, especially for the technical fields. And there's different reasons in Switzerland, because we have low unemployment, we have a demographic change, we have a low output of students with technical skills, and no more aerospace specialization. And overall, a reduced attractiveness of our industry. I mean, who wants to work the graveyard shift? Who wants to work for salaries that are equal in other industries? So aerospace or aviation is no longer considered a sexy business.
Yeah, and I think we have to find ways to make it sexy again. I mean, in the old days, it was always the attraction of maybe flights with airline MROs, and the ability to travel doing outstation repairs and such like. Christian, just coming over to you, I know ARSA is heavily involved in promoting the aviation industry and efforts at staff retention across a wide range of sectors, including FAA, airline, MRO, and business aviation. What do you feel are the key steps to retain and attract more skilled people into aviation MRO, and specifically into engine MRO, if you could give us some examples?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we face as an industry, and we've done a lot of work, to Alan's point, trying to document what the workforce challenge has been. So, we know, for example, that pre-COVID, the technician shortage, at least in the United States, was costing the industry about $100 million per month in foregone economic opportunity, because we just didn't have enough people to do the work. During COVID, we saw at one point last summer, the industry employment in the U.S. was down 25%, so fairly steep decline. But thanks to a number of government programs, we were able to bring a number of those workers back. The talent shortage is the major issue confronting the industry right now, just as it was pre-COVID. And I think that one of the biggest problems we have, because there are obviously these other societal factors that Caroline referenced. One of the challenges we have, I think, is a lack of visibility. I mean, we take for granted that everybody knows our industry exists, but I spend a lot of time talking about the maintenance sector with external audiences, particularly in government. And there's not a lot of recognition. When people think about aviation maintenance, there's still a tendency to think about, airlines doing their own maintenance work, airline mechanics. In the United States, we've got 6 times more people working in technical jobs at repair stations than we have airline mechanics. So there's been a big shift in the employment, but I don't know that the public awareness has caught up with that. And so I don't know that people know that enough people know this industry even exists as an option. These are some statistics that we have in terms of, just kind of that try to characterize the crisis. I already mentioned the economic loss we documented pre-COVID, but you can see these numbers from the Aviation Technician Education Council about the pipeline issues. And, the fact that in the United States, the average mechanic is 53 years old, 36% of them, so a third are within a couple years of retirement. Last year, obviously, COVID was a distortion and disruption, but the fact that we certificated 30% fewer mechanics in past years is significant. And I think the point that Alan made earlier, a lot of these people are looking at other industries as potential places to go, because that A&P certificate in the United States is kind of the gold standard for a U.S. technician in many respects, not just in our sector, but if you have that, there are other places you can go. And then, of course, there's the diversity issue. The fact that, although the percentage of minorities in the industry is ticking up, you can still see that females are only 11% of A&P school enrollment in the United States. So there are a lot of opportunities to diversify the industry, and we're seeing companies do some very good things in terms of retention, working harder, not just on getting people in the door, but doing creative things like mentoring programs to keep them once they come in.
Christian, what have you seen about apprenticeship programs? Here at SR Technique, we have had an apprenticeship program for many, many years, and we continue, even through COVID, investing in that program to have a pipeline of mechanics.
Sure.
Are you seeing that everywhere in the industry?
I'm not seeing it as in many places as I would like to. There are certainly leading industry companies that have been very aggressive on that front and are working with local government and local schools to try to put those programs together. One of our major achievements in this area over the last couple of years was getting money from the federal government. We actually were able to create a new program as part of the last FAA reauthorization law in the United States a couple of years ago. It's a new $5 million per year program specifically designed to help smaller businesses collaborate within their communities to set up apprenticeship programs and do other things to try to attract people to this industry and keep them.
Very good. Are there other regional factors within the US that affect MRO recruitment, Christian?
Yeah, I think and by the way, this is in the spirit of this being an international conversation. This is a slide from the most recent Boeing report on the pilot and technician outlook, and you can see that there are, and I'm involved in a group through IATA that is looking at workforce issues on a global basis. And this is a challenge that everyone everywhere is facing, but obviously the causes of the problem are different from place to place, and that's been very interesting to hear those conversations. In the United States, we have a handful of states where there's considerable MRO presence, places like Oklahoma and Florida, Georgia's growing, California, Texas, Kansas, a handful of others. And so you have kind of this regional dynamic where in certain places there's a huge demand for technicians, and then other places there isn't. And so those places where we have obviously a lot of activity, we tend to see the biggest challenge in trying to find people. But in those areas where the industry is not as prominent, you've got the reverse problem where people don't even know the industry is an option to work in. So I think no matter where you go, they're going to have their own permutations of the problem, but the bottom line issue is the same. We need to build the visibility of this industry, and we need to make sure that schools are producing people that have basic technical skills that we can train into this industry if they're not going to A&P schools or the global equivalent themselves.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I see it here in Ireland as well. I mean, there are a couple of not-for-profit organisations that are trying to get school kids, out to aviation museums to see aircraft at airports, get them to smell, the kerosene, get them to know it at a young age, and what makes it attractive. Get kids into cockpits, and from a young age, maybe going into secondary high school, there should be programs there to make them more aware of the careers in the industry and how they can be rewarding to work in. So I think every sector, every local government, every national government should have a program in place to try and build that interest from a young age. And then moving up into obviously the third level sector as well, there's a role there for the relevant courses to be there to keep pace with industry and technologies in aviation, and to show that there are good prospects at the end of it. And so I think that every country, every region, every state needs to work in that regard to address the skills shortage that's coming our way, especially on engine MRO, as was mentioned earlier. There is if not a bow wave of shop visits coming, definitely an increase in demand for the technical skills that we need.
And Alan, just if I could build on something that Caroline had said earlier, one of the challenges about industry image and what it means to be a mechanic or a technician in an industry. I mean, I think one of our opportunities here is to try to address some of those concerns, either whether it's a lack of awareness or a potentially a negative image, by looking at these new technologies that are coming online. And we know not everyone's going to be working on, advanced air mobility and, the sustainable aircraft fuel and new hybrid engines and things like that. But those are interesting, exciting opportunities. And to the extent that that different things motivate different generations of workers, and that we hate to generalize, but there's kind of that mantra that the younger generation of workers wants to feel a sense of fulfillment, a sense that they're doing something good for society, et cetera, the environment. They're more conscious of these issues. That the fact that we are making progress in this industry to reduce our environmental footprint and to be sustainable going forward, I think it's very exciting, and it's an exciting way to talk about this industry moving forward. That there are opportunities here to join a global high-tech industry that's making some interesting environmental advances, and is going to be very likely changing the way we making even more changes to the way we live and work and travel in the years to come with advanced air mobility coming online.
Absolutely, and I mentioned earlier there about some of the perks and benefits in the old days of getting involved in airline MRO and engine MRO. With the move kind of over the last number of years of fewer independents and more OEM type of shops, I think there's a need for OEMs in the engine sector to work in this regard as well, to help encourage people to join the industry, because many of them will be working in OEM shops, and we need to find ways of encouraging people to work in those areas. There are fewer airline shops, as we know, so those old ways of attracting people in there are no longer there. So we need to be creative, and as I mentioned earlier on, having this role of treating the staff as as humans and working relationships rather than treating them as man hours and numbers to produce goods, I think is important. So hopefully OEMs will come on board, but there's a big lead time into that, and we need to start early, start young. And there is a lot of activity. I've seen it around the world in lower, higher, mid and higher education. So do you think other engine shops, I know your own experience, Caroline and Christian, you've seen on the US side, are there similar trends in other parts of the world, do you think?
I think Europe and the Americas are probably facing the highest labor shortages as demand comes back up, where in other parts of the world, there may be more technicians available. We have noticed pre-COVID, when we were adding people at a rapid pace, we had to go outside of Switzerland, we had to go outside of Europe to find technicians. So this leads me to believe that other parts of the world besides the US and besides Europe do have labor.
So that kind of nicely brings us on to the first poll question. I'm sure we have representatives both in Stavanger and abroad. That may be able to give their input on this question. Do you think there's a shortage of skilled, experienced staff at engine MROs? Maybe you could let us know your view. We do have to address it. I think it's up to the shops, it's to local governments, as I mentioned earlier on, to put the plans in place to address it. So the other question we had in the poll, we had one other question, which was what factors are important to attract more talent to engine MRO? So we have a couple of choices on this poll question. We have a look at that. So career prospects, salary, further education, they're the choices we have in the poll. So yeah, it's moving up here now and down. So we'll give it another couple of seconds. Yeah, it looks like the money speaks here, and career prospects, though, I think are very, very important in second position. I did mention benefits earlier on. The audience seemed to think that benefits aren't as hugely important for their education.
Christian,
In fourth
do
place.
you have any comparison of mechanics in the MRO space versus technical talent in other industries, and how those salaries compare?
Yeah, I mean they're comparable. They are a little higher. The last time I looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, but I'll confess, Caroline, that was pre-COVID. So and one of the problems we've had with COVID, one of the many problems anyway, has been that it's really screwed up the government data. So a lot of the data that we were relying on is, there are lags in it, and it's going to be a couple of years before we are able to kind of parse through a lot of this stuff. But I think that we've long said that I've had conversations, believe it or not, with economics professors about this issue, and they've said you don't have a labor shortage, you're just not paying people enough. And I say, look, I've got companies out there that would pay well over the odds for a person who is talented to come in the door. And if the person doesn't have the basic skills, you can't put them to work as a productive worker. That's a fundamental truth. So, we're constantly looking at the salary numbers. I do think that they're comparable. The question is, are they comparable when you factor in the level of responsibility you're asking aviation technicians to take on? Some of the lifestyle issues that Caroline mentioned in the United States. Also, our technicians are subject to drug and alcohol testing. So there are other factors to consider when people are looking. Could I go to work at a car dealership? Could I go to work at a construction equipment dealership, or could I go to work at an engine MRO? And we need to be conscious of all those considerations that people are thinking about.
Very good. Okay, so that's the poll is pretty clear there that salary is most important. So I think to conclude, I suppose we've addressed kind of broadly some of the issues that would help improve and attract more people to engine MRO. I think the short discussion is not going to get into the meat of it. The strategies that can be implemented, we touched on. Hopefully, people out there will work with their local governments, education folks, and try and implement and encourage people into engine MRO, into aviation MRO in general from a young age, and start from there, and trying to avoid the drain into other industries. I think senior management in engine MRO need to implement some creative solutions to avoid that. It's not necessarily all about the money, but trying to make, as Caroline said earlier on, the industry more sexy and getting back to where we were before, where people were queuing to get into it. That's the goal. We need to, going back to what Klaus Muller was saying earlier on, the goal is here to make it what it used to be, and everybody will enjoy working in it. So on that note, any final points, or maybe we have some questions from the audience? Caroline, sorry, go ahead.
So at SRT, we're constantly looking for talented people, even though right now with short-time work, we can recall people back quickly. But we do believe there's that wave coming, and we do want to be ready to meet the demand from our customers. So we are actively working with schools. We're actively working with the government and other agencies in Switzerland and in other places where we have facilities to promote the industry. We're also promoting the high tech that Christian talked about, that it's not just getting your fingers dirty. We have high-tech machines. We also are transforming our company with a new digital operating model. So those are all things that companies can use to promote themselves and promote the aviation industry. Personally, I'm involved with a non-profit organization where we go to schools with 10, 12-year-olds to talk about the industry and not talk about pilots or flight attendants, but other positions for finance, for supply chain, where we need people to be interested in aviation.
Yeah, and my only parting thought, Alan, would be to just thank Caroline for the work she's doing on behalf of the industry, because it's companies like SR Techniques that are leading the way in many respects and trying to get people in. And the fundamental takeaway, as far as I'm concerned, everyone's got to understand that this is everybody's problem. Don't wait for the industry. Don't wait for the big companies. Don't wait for government to try to come and solve it. It's up to all of us to get out there and talk about what we love about this industry, recruit people in, and make sure they stay.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. So on that note, I see Tom there. Do we have any questions from the audience, or how do you want to move on?
Well, the final question that we did come in on Slido was asking about what SRT are doing. I think Caroline addressed that very nicely there. There's one question that has just come in for Caroline. An anonymous question is asking about salaries from SRT. And as engine overhaul increases, do you expect salaries to change in the short term?
Well, we have to stay competitive in the marketplace with our customers, and also competitive in the industry to attract talent.
Very good.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, that is all the questions, and I think we're about time. So with that, Alan, Christian, Caroline, thank you very much for your time and for joining us virtually. So that does conclude day one of the conference. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Bye, Christian.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that does conclude day one of the conference. So just a few thank yous before we close off today. Firstly, to our gentlemen at the back, to Douvre Event and to Event Video, the AV, the streaming, the production, it all sits with these guys, and it's really impressive stuff. And to have people dial in from around the world is really important. So thank you all for your work today. Also, thank you to our speakers and attendees and sponsors for their continued support of the event. We start tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with a session focused on engine component repair. Just as I mentioned in my opening remarks, please do mark the dates in your calendar, the 7th to 8th of September, Aero Engines Europe returns to Dublin. But for now, until 6 p.m, we'll be hosting drinks here at the hotel. And for those who have RSVP'd, the drinks reception hosted by Aero Norway will be starting at 6:15 at the Norwegian Petroleum Museum. Some details on the screen here. So the first bus is at 5:45, the second bus at 6:05, and the reception, I think, concludes at 8:15. So thank you very much again for your time today, and we look forward to enjoying a drink tonight.